The Odd Pod. It's time for another delve into the archives, and today we listen to a programme first broadcast on the station over 30 years ago. We joined David Collister and Peter Kelly for an edition of Kelly's Eye, looking at the Quaterbridge Hotel.
Peter, what's Kelly's Eye looking at today?
It's primitive, but I'm looking at a Gothic arch.
Now, would you explain the term Gothic first of all?
Well, Gothic is a description of a style of architecture which appeared in medieval times, but the Victorians reintroduced it, and to show that it was reintroduced they put a K on it, whereas normally you finish it with the C, and the arches are what I'd call a flat arch. In other words, instead of being a high pointed arch or a round arch, it sort of comes up, slightly curves and then goes on an angle to a low point, really a Tudor arch. And this one I say is primitive because it's in a back gate opening, or it's above a back gate opening, and it's a very thick piece of masonry, about 16 inches thick going over, and it's open on top. In fact, it's got a floodlight on top, but nevertheless it's there, and it's probably from 1890 or something. The building it's beside predates it, although there are extensions to it.
We're in or near perhaps the busiest junction in the Isle of Man, and trying to see this building through the traffic as we've tried to escape from that. We can see that it's been newly decorated and seems to have had parts added to it, but maybe we ought to explain the location first.
Yes, we're standing at the Quaterbridge. Well, we're not, we're actually standing on the bypass road, looking across to the Quaterbridge Hotel, and it's become an extremely busy junction, as you say. On the left-hand side, the lower part of the building, it's got a hipped roof coming up on one side. That means instead of going up with a gable, the roof pulls in like a triangle. And at one time, the roof came back down the other side. In other words, it was a hipped roof on both sides. It was 3 bays wide, or 3 windows wide. And in the centre was an arched doorway, but not a Gothic arch, a flat arch with fanlight, and for many years it had a projecting porch on the front. Now, what's happened again, late 1880s, 1890s, when the island has become popular, when all these people are flocking out to Braddon, to the open-air services, and coming to circuses, and equally the international exhibition, where the National Sports Centre is now, that ran for 3 years. Then this hotel, which dates from about 1839 as a house, and then
so originally a house,
but converted to an inn or hotel, whatever, fairly early on. The extension was put on the right-hand side, which, as you see, obviously has those high Victorian rooms, particularly on the ground floor, which is really the first floor, because the ground floor is underneath in the basement because of the drop of the land.
And built almost over the river as well, isn't it?
Well,
not quite,
but it certainly heads out to the back, towards the river. But what you've got to bear in mind, David, is that the bridge, which is now only the roadway is about 3 foot from the side of the building, allowing for the pavement, wasn't that wide. The original Quaterbridge, which was much narrower, and in fact, if we look over to the far side, you can see the sandstone capping on top of the parapet of the bridge, complete with a pillar at one end and a pillar at the other.
Yeah.
And the roadway was only half, if in fact slightly less than half the width it is now, and it's been extended. And when that extension took place in the 30s, was when, of course, another property around the corner had to be demolished. The road was extended in concrete, and the property that was demolished was the Nook Cafe, and when that disappeared, we got that mid-1930s
the new Nook,
the modern style building.
Yeah.
So when this was here, it had a bit of a garden behind it, and now you'd call it a beer garden. Then it was just a garden to the hotel, and over the years, in the 60s certainly, it was extended at the rear, and now it's got an almost Regency staircase, open staircase going down the back to take you into the beer garden.
Now, the painting is done, it's mostly cream. The walls are cream. The sills are in an orange shade, and the window surrounds, some of the window surrounds are white. The windows are painted white. Are those the sort of colours that the Victorians would have used, perhaps, or not?
No. When the original building was put up, 1839, that period, it would be rendered, it could well be rendered in Roman cement, which would have a slight colour tinge to it. But it would be left plain. It wouldn't be decorated at all. Years later, when decoration started, it would probably be a form of lime wash that would be put on, so it would be white. The windows could have been white using white lead, or they could have been a shade of red using red lead, and so on, which they did, which of course helped preserve the timber. If we look at the original part of the building, those windows on the top floor, on the first floor, I would say are original 1839. Sliding sash, Georgian paned, no horns on the windows. We then look at the extension, and there you've got the windows of the 1890s. Sliding sash with horns, not small panes. The Victorians obviously got into producing glass in much larger sizes. And on the ground floor, the window there has been a Victorian or later replacement. It's a larger pane one with horns. Again, it's lost its second window on the ground floor at the time, and it lost its porch. But no, so many Victorian buildings when built, Lock Promenade included, were not painted at all from the start, and it's only gradually paintwork came in. Mr. Parks, who owned the Sun Hotel, which later became the Salisbury, he would spend his winters on the continent, and one year he came back and was so impressed with the terracotta buildings in Italy that he had the Sun Hotel painted this, well, I think it got referred to as steam packet red later, the terracotta, and that started a fashion in Douglas. And eventually, as I say, most properties were rendered up. But you still will find, and if you go down to Port Erin, there's a terrace there just topside of St Catherine's Church. They've been there from about the 1890s, early 90s anyway, and they've not had a coat of paint on the front of them at all.
Quaterbridge, I seem to remember, is connected with Quarterlands.
Yes, a meeting here of the Quarterlands. Ballabruey is the obvious one, and I rather gather Ballacameen came down. I don't know if they actually meet in this point or very close to this point, but obviously putting the bridge here. Now I presume the land of Kirby here is part of the Quarterland of something, and same with Portashee. But it was the meeting. Now at one time when this hotel opened, it wasn't called the Quaterbridge. It was called the Union Hotel, which I think was for the same reason. It was the union of the estates, or the union of the roads.
The Odd Pod.